let go of the hard way, because struggle and working hard does not make you stronger. It oftentimes just keeps you stuck. When you start looking at the identity of an individual, of yourself, and the identity of the team you're working with, and all of the individuals on the team, and then what that team's identity is, and when every single person finds their ease and flow, when everyone gets into their best approach and adjust their perspective to all align towards seeing what's possible in reaching whatever goal, corporate goal, community goal that you all have together. Hey everybody, Jeff here. Before we get started, if you're getting value from the podcast, please take a moment to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For those of you listening on podcast apps, don't forget to rate and review. Your support really helps the show reach more people, and for that, I am truly grateful. Now let's dive in. Welcome to The Point with Jeff Spikes. Hello, and welcome to The Point. Today is a great day. It's better than any other day to start to consider and look at how you struggle. And the great news is that with strengths, struggling can be a non-topic. It can completely transform into all kinds of other strategies that you never even considered. You know, what makes you unique is your approach to things, your perspective, and the choices you make. And your perspective and your approach are both very changeable. You can adapt those and shift them and do different things. Well, the idea is that you're most likely coming at life using strategies that you learned from other people, that you've been taught over the years, and you may or may not have given a great deal of consideration as to how you're wired and what natural ways that you move forward. And if you've heard of your strengths, and if you've gained some information about what's great about you, it might have given you a reason to continue being a certain way and added more stability to something, but not opened your mind to the ideas of how adjusting your approach and adjusting your perspective could lean into something amazingly wonderful about you that maybe takes the best of you that you're using all the time and reels it back in and has you use that more sparingly, more cautiously. I consider if the best of you is all you, if what you're best at is the only tool you have, right? If that's it, then you might be overusing it. So if you've looked at your strengths and you've decided that one of the themes in Clifton's strengths, for example, is that it's responsibility, you might be using that, and that might be a reason to always be following up with people to the point of bothering them that you follow up as much. But then you say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. If your belief, and my number one theme is belief in Clifton's strengths. So I might take it upon myself to be the values keeper or the judgment person that keeps everyone on target with how they should be. And that's one way to look at strengths, is to have this vision and this view of what I'm then meant to do with it, right? But let's erase that for a minute and spin back to this idea of struggling, and let's look at what if the struggle is because you're using the greatest part of yourself. If you're very directive and bold, and people know it when you walk into a room, you've got a great presence about you. Some people might feel like you're steamrolling over them. And you might say, what's the matter what people think if I'm getting it done? What's that matter? It only matters when it does. It only matters when you want to influence those people and make a positive impact. And when you start to challenge yourself on what makes you happy and how effective you are. So, again, if you're in a struggle, then there's a reason to change, because there might not be a need to struggle. So strengths really work. So ease, alignment, and purpose are the strategy here when you get into strengths. So you may be someone who looks at life from the lens of hard work is valuable and the struggle is real and that's good, and that nothing's worthwhile if we don't have to fight for it. And I'm here to tell you that there's no judgment on that way of thinking or that way of living. And there's a possibility that that might no longer be required for you to be successful and happy. And although that may be required at times, that also may not be required at all times, giving you an opportunity to do something slightly different and lean into who you are in a better way. Kicking off events around, for trade shows and other things, one of the most exciting things to do is to help people consider who they are introducing themselves to and how they're introducing themselves. Get them to consider the identity of the team that they're representing when they're there, the identity of them as an individuals and in who they are. And are they really introducing themselves and their teams to people? Or are they just meeting, and are they then learning about other people? Or are both sides of this just meeting this strategy that each other's using to introduce themselves? And there's a big difference, right? If you're going to get the most out of meeting somebody, it's nice to move a level deeper beyond the strategy of just meeting someone and and you then get to know them and get to understand what may be a value or a benefit for the two people to know each other. So the most powerful people that I've worked with, the greatest leaders that are the most honed in, the ones that create and inspire, that everyone feels good walking away from, damn, have learned how to stop struggling, and they work in a flow. And there's triggers that happen when they sense something. We've repurposed triggers so that what would trigger a negative response is now we're trying to get a minute or two before that so that we can then trigger a new behavior or a new way of thinking that leads us into a result more like what we want. So we're going to talk about rewiring today, how you can rewire your brain, your thoughts, your neural pathways, and tap in through your strengths into something that really utilizes the best of you. The nuance of your genius can be utilized to make a greater flow of ease and effortlessness so that you're gaining the results that you are meant to gain and that you want to gain with less struggle, right? So let's try and make things easier. We covered this a little bit already, but talking about the myth of hard work, right? Why hard work is often this unaware effort, right? If all we're doing is working hard to work hard and we're not considering easier ways or other ways. This is what last week there was the topic of the podcast was then the point. Last week we talked about disruption and pattern interrupts and the value of these things. If you're in a zone where you put your head down and work diligently and hard to move ahead, that can be a strategy that you move through. And some things are physically difficult or some things are mentally more challenging or more taxing, or it takes an increase of focus or anything else. But does that mean it needs to be hard? Does that mean it needs to be a struggle? With strengths, you can reduce friction and you can build, and which will end up building momentum faster. So if you disrupt the cycle of anything that you're putting your head down and working really hard in, you might find something easier. I was pulling weeds the other day for a friend. We went out to clear the boulevard, the area between the sidewalk and the street in front of their house, and we're pulling weeds that had grown way too large. And thank goodness the ground was a little bit wet. And my way of doing it seemed to other people to be really hard work, but to me it was easy because I was using my legs, I was bending at the knees, and I was gripping as hard as I could and using my legs to lift up and pulling weeds out like nothing flat. And they thought I looked like a video game with dirt flying and things flying as I threw things into piles. And I got a great deal of stuff done in a very long period of time. To me, that was easy. And I got a little bit of physical movement in, and I was able to, and it felt good. Well, to somebody else, that looked extremely difficult. That was hard. Now, to me, a grind would be and my perfectionism would rather get in there and make sure I got every weed and did everything. And I might be digging in there, and it might, and to me, taking a long time might be diligent. It might be doing all those things, but man, that is really hard work. And when I used to value hard work, I wasn't looking for those kind of efficiencies. Now, even better, hire someone to do it, right? If you don't want to pull weeds, hire someone to do it. Well, I happen to enjoy going out and being in nature and putting my hands in the dirt and doing things. So to me, that was enjoyable. But might be a very rudimentary example of what we're talking about when we say what's hard or what's not hard. But now, to someone else who didn't have the grip strength, or and their back's not feeling not all that strong, and they're not geared to pull it, someone else was out there doing the same work, and to them that was taking forever just to do a very small section. So we were working at a major change of capacity. But you know what they were great at? They were great at making sure that things got in the bags and that the bags weren't too heavy and that they were able to be closed. Because one of the things I'll do, to me, hard work is jamming them so full and maximizing every bag and spending an extra 15 minutes making sure it all gets in there. So somebody else was really good at cutting things into smaller pieces. And all of these things came together into leveraging what our giftings were so that everyone felt like they could be a part of. It would have been a lot harder for me then to have to do every single piece of that. So sometimes it's just leveraging teamwork, right? And that unaware effort is just, if you could just go out there and get lost in a project and don't consider the potential of what could be done, like hiring someone, or like getting a tool that helps do the process, or wetting the ground down. Doing that without getting everything wet would have been an entirely different story. So let's move into this idea of what easy actually feels like. Think of a time in your life where what you were doing felt easy. As a matter of fact, think of something you're great at that you wonder why people think it's so amazing. Have you ever been patted on the back for something that just is who you are? What if that's the most valuable thing about you? Sometimes the consideration you might have is that if it's only worth it if it's hard work. You're getting paid to do something that's difficult. Well, what if what's easy for you is what you got paid for? A friend of mine is a framer, and and I know other people that are drywallers. So now we're into the thought of construction, and they're so good at it, and that they're moving things that just because they know how to, that look ridiculous as far as how to do it. And the ease and flow that they use is absolutely simple. And they know the difference between working in the heat and working in the shade or in the direct sun. And they organize themselves to make life easier. Well, when you have to physically work that hard and you want to sustain a living where there's physical work involved, you learn how to be smart about how you do things so that it's not as hard. And smarter, not harder, becomes a very visible concept. Well, what happens when you're working relationally? If you've watched TV your whole life, you might actually have programmed yourself to believe that there has to be a drama cycle, some type of drama to get through, so a lesson can be learned, and then you can be happy and have unity on a team or in a group. You might be using these drama cycles because you think that's the way to be based on what's been patterned on TV. And that might be harder. That's that unawareness that it might be harder than what you think it is. So what does it feel like to be in alignment, for something to get done quickly? When's the last time you finished a project and looked back and thought, man, that was easy? You can move back into that moment, that project, that wherever your mind went, and think through and journal, take some notes of what was it that was happening in that moment that felt better for you, and is it relative to other things that you were doing? There's ways that you can know if you're fighting against your strengths. Are there times when you just have a hot temper where all of a sudden you're aggravated and irritated? You might be forcing yourself into someone else's strategy that doesn't fit your personality. Or if you're overthinking every move, if you're just if you're confusing forks in the road, there's just a basic decision and you're overthinking each one, you might be really in a place where you're fighting against your strengths. Now, there's a difference between fighting against your strengths and overusing them or doubting them, right? So, somebody that's really strategic, that is just naturally really strategic, in theory, we'd think should be able to make decisions quickly. But many times, people who are overly strategic will dive deep into working hard at being strategic. Well, if it's a gift, if it's a strength, then why would it be difficult? And sometimes just entering that idea into the mind has us relax and trust that we're naturally strategic. And sometimes it's just a belief system that says it's not okay to make a mistake, or it's not okay, we can't pick the wrong direction on this, or whatever it is. And that belief is causing this stress and anxiety to have to do that. In employment sometimes, or in career type activities, that really could be something entirely different, in that the pressure's coming externally. It's coming from a supervisor or a directive. So how critical is that, and how do you manage that within yourself if ultimately you're winning? And oftentimes working too hard at a strategy, if you're highly strategic, is a sign that you're also, you're fighting against it. So I'm looking down at some notes here to make sure we're on track. The other one is momentum, right? We know, what flow feels like. If you're not sure what you're great at, or go ask someone that's known you most of your life. People who've known you the longest, or someone that knows you the most, and ask them, when have you seen me most fulfilled? Can you remember a time when just everything came together for me? What was it that I was doing? And, again, dig into those moments, right? So if you're having that, if you're not getting momentum and you're lacking creativity, I call that this sense of resourcefulness, right? There's emotional resourcefulness, but there's also our ability to tap into resources. And if we're in a clutch, or we're feeling depressed, or we're down, or we're tense, it can seem difficult to access the natural resources that are right there within us. So that's another way that you can know that you're fighting against your strengths. You're maybe telling yourself things that aren't true. So sometimes changing your thought processes and what you're saying to yourself and others can be really critical in those moments. So here's the shift for this type of thing. If you shift this, you want to be able to make this easier quickly. Like, let's just say in the next week, if you identify 2 strengths that are total flow opportunities for you. One's a time that you are really finding a rhythm and a groove with life, and that it's working, right? Design your day around those things. Those 1 or 2 things. Design your day around trying to look at how that fits into your day. How does the energy of that, how do the behaviors of that, and really path through what that looks like. If you're interested in setting up daily routines, DM me and let me know, and we can actually look at ways to build that into your daily routine, whether we use the gratitude worksheets, which you can then implement some of your strengths that you're grateful for and how you want to integrate those into your day. And there's some practices to really pull that down, and then you're stacking a number of different things into one process and gaining a great deal. So, but let go of the hard way. When you find something and lean into it, let go of the hard way, because struggle and working hard does not make you stronger. It oftentimes just keeps you stuck. When you start looking at the identity of an individual, of yourself, and the identity of the team you're working with, and all of the individuals on the team, and then what that team's identity is, and when every single person finds their ease and flow, when everyone gets into their best approach and adjust their perspective to all align towards seeing what's possible in reaching whatever goal, corporate goal, community goal that you all have together. And look at what you're valuing both independently, and corporately and group and as a group, because it's okay if there's some of those things are competing, because sometimes they need to, right? We can, one person can be valuing forward movement and moving quickly, speed of execution, and another one can be valuing safety. And the two make an extremely strong pair, because you're staying safe, keeping everyone emotionally, physically, mentally safe while charging forward and making things happen. So you get the best of both worlds by leaning into that. But if you argue against it and diminish each other, you end up in these stall points, and then it becomes very difficult to work through. But the end result is still the same. You end up finding a way to work together if you're going to get anywhere, and if you're going to sustain it, and then you move forward. So why not make that easy, right? So if you're in the final part of this, is that if you're anywhere near the thought or the concept of burnout, listen to last week's episode on disruptive behaviors, on intentionally disruptive behaviors. What's a pattern interrupt really look like? And let's end burnout. Let's bring an end to this whole thing of working so hard that we back ourselves into a corner and that we burn out. There's really no. You may find a need to do that, and you may find a need to then have a story of how you're recovering and feeling better. There's a lot of reasons why that makes sense sometimes. But it's really unnecessary. It's possible to get yourself into a full flow with your strengths and not have to experience that. Can you imagine putting burnout and overexhaustion into the rearview mirror and never having to experience it again, and feeling a flow and an effortlessness and an excitement and an enthusiasm for what's actually happening in life and where you're going and what you're experiencing in the moment to get there? Spend some time thinking about that. Next week, episode 127. It's a blessing to be here, you and your genius, the absolute innate genius within you. And the nuance of that genius is the primary focus here. And helping you find that, know that, and move forward in that, as well as honor others and look for it in others, is the primary focus here. We'll see you next time. Be the best version of you. Only you can do it. Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of The Point with me, Jeff Spikes. Please visit jeffspikes.com for everything you would need to know to engage with me offline. And lastly, thank you for your time, your attention, and your consideration. This is The Point.